No mai, haere mai, piki mai, ka kia mai, kia ora, and welcome to 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. 30 minutes, one guest, no cuts. What we record is what you get. SAS soldier Jamie Pennell spent nearly 20 years with New Zealand's elite Special Forces Regiment. He earned the Gallantry Star, the second highest award for military bravery, for leading an SAS fight with terrorists who'd taken over the Intercontinental Hotel in Kabul in 2011. His new book, Serviceman J, reveals in harrowing detail what it's like to fight to the death with terrorists armed to the teeth and fitted with suicide vests. It also delves into the psyche of a Special Forces soldier, what it gives you, what it takes away, and what others can learn from that mentality and from that service. So let's start the clock. 30 minutes with Jamie Pennell. Jamie, thanks very much for coming on 30. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be here.
Who dares wins. It's the motto of the SAS and it's the final words of your book. Who dares wins. What does it mean to you?
Who dares wins means basically, those who dare win. Basically, it's taking calculated risks and, making sure that you achieve the objective no matter what and being able to deviate from the plan at times. Obviously, when you have a plan, it only survives past right up to the start line, and then past that point, you need to be able to adapt that. And I think the who dares wins attitude was definitely shown in the Intercontinental Hotel when we resolved that particular attack.
Yeah, we'll get to that because that really is probably it was the big one for you, wasn't it? And so we'll talk about that. You wanted to join the SAS in your teens. You're in the army at 19. You had one failed attempt to try to get into the SAS and you were badged at about 21. How tough is it to get into the SAS?
It's very, very tough, and so it should be. It's, as I said before, the most physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually difficult journey I've ever had in my entire life. And for good measure. We are selecting people who operate behind enemy lines for long durations of time under a huge amount of pressure, either in small teams or much larger teams. And we're looking at the individual at the highest function of any SAS soldier, carrying heavy weight on their back by day and night, any season, weather or terrain, under time pressure, sleep deprived, food deprived. And these are very real sort of things that you will experience in operations. Having been in operations and in training, we continue on that training in that sort of fashion. So we must have someone who is very, very robust and able to do that.
You write of your second attempt that the only way I'd get pulled off would be if I was seriously injured, incapacitated or dead. So that's the attitude they're looking for, right?
Yep.
That you just aren't going to give up. Someone's going to have to pull you out of there.
Yep, just one foot in front of the other. And as I said before, that who dares wins attitude is you do not stop until the job is complete. And, really good in the regiment, having that mentality. Once you leave the regiment, now obviously we'll get into transition in a moment, but, that needs to be tempered as well. You can push yourself too far. If you don't keep an eye on things, you'll get to where I got to, which was burnout.
And there are a number of misconceptions. I mean, some people would think it was the biggest, sort of bulkiest guys who would get through that sort of training. But often, and I went to Afghanistan with the SAS, a lot of them were quite wiry guys, weren't they? Quite the skinny guys.
Yeah, that's right. And
what's that about? Less.
It comes back to that. And, I think, Dan Hooker says it the best, that you can't teach ticker. It's something that he says, that USC fighter. And, it does come down to this, but it's the mindset. And, I've seen all types. And, both as a soldier that's been part of the selection process and as a directing staff taking the selection process and seeing guys come through the regiment, and kind of the selection process goes all the way through your career. You cannot really point out who is going to make it. Some guys who are quite big and have a big engine on them can actually move very, very quickly and faster than us wiry guys, you know what I mean, and can go further than we can, and vice versa. You can have guys that are actually skinnier and shorter than I am, that are carrying half their weight on their back, and they can just eat it up. And it's it's amazing sort of environment to be in, very highly competitive.
Are there women in the SAS now?
Not badge members yet. We have had women who have attempted selection but haven't got that far. But that's not to say that that'll never happen in the future. So yeah.
And do you feel that there is a place for women?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like we have enablers who operate within our teams, and I've had women on my teams that have been out on the ground with me. And you need those people to be able to support the mission and achieve it.
Let's talk about getting deployed. You went into Kandahar and there was a reconnaissance mission there that the SAS was going to fulfill, but you didn't have vehicles. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the innovation, and I guess this is part of it. You write in your book that you got 8 desert Humvees for 4 bottles of whiskey and some trays of Lion Red from the Americans. Did you actually have to trade booze for essential equipment?
Yeah, well, you don't get something for nothing. You got to grease the cogs to get these sort of things. I'm sure the Americans are going to help us out anyway, but again, we're not going to trade for air, so that's what we had, and we thought that was pretty good currency at the time, and they did too. So it was really good. I mean, when we first went over there in Concord 1, basically the boys, as in the badge guys that were over there, were doing essentially foot patrols, long range reconnaissance foot patrols, and then that progressed into mobility, which was the tour that I was on. Pretty much jumped straight into it. So that's how how things evolved, and it enabled us to get out across large swathes of land and do a hell of a lot more than just being in one sort of small isolated point.
And you're an outrider at this point. You're on a Kawasaki 250 farm bike, effectively.
Yeah, at the time, yeah. So that's all we had to operate with, and you operate with what you have. You know what I mean?
So you got the main guys in the Humvees, and then your outriders, 2 of you.
Correct. Yep. So they're out in front, route finding, early warning, and a number of other jobs that you need to do. And that for me was the best possible position to be in, because you can actually get away from the convoy. You can basically travel anywhere you feel like you want to go, up into the mountains, high up into the mountains. So you've got a good vantage point to be able to give the convoy comms on what was happening. But it was good because, after that particular tour, and when we came back in 2004, we actually got our motorbikes upgraded to KTM 525s, which are a completely different beast. So we sort of learned our lesson. But at the end of the day, like I said, you don't moan about it. You have what you got. And
no, sure, but I'm interested in the innovation, because having fewer resources means you have to innovate, right? I think you talk about getting old bedposts from the dump and making sort of things on your back of your trucks and things. Yeah. I mean, real sort of number 8 wire Kiwi stuff.
Yeah, 100%. The boys are always going to do it. We're always trying to evolve to make ourselves better and operate more effectively. You're not ever going to have all the gear all of the time.
Is that an advantage in some ways?
100%, I think so. Yeah, and you learn that on our software training as well, being innovative. But yeah, I mean, we had, like I said, we had to go down the dump, getting bed frames, making those into weapon mounts. I think the only manufactured weapon mount was for the main weapon, which is good. But getting plywood, making boxes for all our gear and our food and stuff like that, and we could make it how we wanted to make it, you know what I mean? Each vehicle was slightly different. But
was that noticed by the other forces?
Yeah, it was actually, yeah. And we did have, not on my tour, but on one of the previous tours, I think they had one of the US Special Forces guys come down just to see what we were doing, and they took note of how we did our vehicle setups. I mean, our lineage is back to the LRDG, so it's, although we may not have thought about that at the time, you know what I mean? We kind of still had that mentality. That's exactly what they were doing way back in the day.
So there is innovation, and that's good, but is there a point even now where we're not putting enough resource into the SAS? I mean, I've seen recent reporting by the Herald this year that the CDF was told the SAS was near collapse. Some were paid a $30,000 retention fee. Saw another report in August from the Herald that people were buying their own boots. Now, I know you're out of it now, but have you got any thoughts about whether we are resourcing the SAS properly?
I think from what I've heard, I think we're very well resourced. It's equip the man, not man the equipment, is the sort of the narrative that we use. But yeah, I don't hear anything other than that the boys have got what they need to do the job. And I was there as most recently as last year, I suppose. when they were sort of putting things on display, and they're in a hell of a lot better position than we ever were, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, again, I can't speak for that because I've been out a while, but to me it looks pretty good.
They got what they need. Let's get to the big one, the Intercontinental Hotel siege. I mean, it's a utterly horrific scene when I'm reading it, incredibly compelling. But you've got this, 5-story building. You've got comms coming in saying that the terrorists are going to cut off guests' heads and throw the people off the building. You get there, these terrorists are on the roof. It's all guns blazing. I mean, reading your account of being fired at from above in a stairwell with grenades being lobbed down, are you surprised that you're here today talking to me about it?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it was a big night. I only just recently realised that it took us about 4 or 5 hours to get from the car park up to the roof, and that was really only halfway for us. But when I think about that time, it was about 30 minutes, you know what I mean, like in a heartbeat. Like I never actually dwelled on that and had a sort of think about how long it actually took us to get up there. So, you know, the gun battle in the stairwell, I'm actually not too sure how long we were actually in there for. And that's very interesting, being in those sort of critical incidents, how, you know, time has played out. When people ask you how long you're in there, you feel like you're in there for maybe minutes. Could have been longer, and I don't think anyone would give you an accurate answer.
Because you're in a terrible position. You've got someone firing down at you from a stairwell. That is not a good place to be, is it?
No, not for anyone. And again, you have to make the decision about whether or not it's a great idea to keep pushing up. I mean, if that was the only option, then we would obviously plan and execute to go up there. But, you know, I guess we'll get into it about being in that state of flow. My mind was wide open and I could see other options.
Yeah, just to set that up for people, I mean, it is quite confronting in the book. You write when you get to the roof, there are satellite dishes up there as you'd expect on a big hotel. You see a leg coming out from behind this and you think that you start shooting at it, then you realise it's just a leg.
Yeah.
So people have detonated themselves, blown themselves up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there was a lot going on at the time. Obviously, when we're having the gun battle in the stairwell, the initial contact with Steve Askin was such that they could hear us coming up the stairwell. We were with the CRU at the time. We'd done nothing like this with them before. It was well above.
So just for people, that's the crisis response unit. Are these Afghan forces? Okay, but they're not elite special force soldiers.
No, they weren't at that time.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So they hadn't done this before.
No, correct. We'd only really done, you know, single-story, double-story dwellings, compounds and bits and pieces.
So you're realising this is on us?
Yeah, I could tell that straight away. As soon as we got into the lobby at the bottom of the hotel, I knew that we had to take the lead, and that was it. Usually we'd just enable, but we had to take the lead on this one and just get them doing what we needed to do. So, yeah, made a lot of noise going up the stairwell. They knew we were coming up. They sent a guy down. Steve Askin was the lead assaulter. They came round basically, you know, from me to you, maybe 1.5 meters away. Both raised their weapons, started firing, both fired. Steve hit the mark, the other guy didn't, but he sort of dropped to the ground and ran straight back up the top of the stairwell, got to the top. And looking at some of the footage afterwards, he lay on the ground up the top on the roof. His mate came over and talked to him, and I think he talked about how he's going to detonate himself, moved away, detonated himself, took both of them out, which was a win for us. And then we had a helicopter flying around the top of the hotel as well with 2 helo snipers in it, and they were engaging terrorists at the same time. So we had some detonations going on there. So I guess going back to, you know, what you said at the start was that basically made the roof look like a butcher shop. There's arms and legs and heads and everything all over the place, and which is why I shot at a leg.
Do you still see that in your head?
Yeah, I mean, it's been into my brain. I don't think I'm affected by it in any way. I think our training, which, you know...
but how do you train for that?
Well, you know, we train for hours and hours, day and night, you know, both in New Zealand and overseas, get things as close as possible to realism as we can possibly get. And it just goes on and on and on. So when you get into that space, I can only talk for me personally, for others maybe not so much, but, you know, it's... Again, I'm not trying to be a tough guy or anything like that. It's just a matter of fact. It's another day on the job, and, you know, when I see that stuff, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, cool, what are we going to do next? You know, I mean, I'm pretty mission focused all the way to a point where I'm having a shower and having a feed back in base.
So you were that calm. Let's just have a closer look at that. You've got helicopters with snipers trying to take the terrorists out. So that's happening here. You've got the terrorists on the roof. You've got what you're doing. You're almost envisaging all this kind of in 3D. And you say in your book that you were as calm as you would be sitting on a couch watching a movie. You say you could see everything that was going on around me in my mind's eye, what was happening on the roof, on the stairs, who was down there. My brain was staying ahead of everything and seeing what was going to happen. I was just calm and in a flow state. Had you had that before?
No, haven't had it before, haven't had it since. I've probably had it at a lesser level, because at the end of the day, with flow states, you can either refocus yourself into the present moment. It's essentially being in the present moment all of the time and completely focused on the present moment. So we can refocus into that. Another one is challenge, and then another one is your life's on the line. And I think the life on the line one is we're at the peak. It was amazing. It made things super easy to think about. I mean, the fact that I could see the whole hotel in 3D. I knew where the stairwells were. I knew where we'd just come from. I could hear the shooting on the roof. There was, shooting going off the roof, up trying to hit the helicopter with our guys in it. There's shooting coming back down, hitting the roof as well. We're still in a contact inside the in the stairwell. But it's phenomenal. It's I can't say much more than that. It's just the calmness got me, I think. Just being super calm in that particular moment of chaos it was like a question mark in my head, thinking, hey, what's going on here?
So you actually noticed it at the time?
Yeah, I noticed it, but at the time, I didn't know I was in that flow state. I had too much to think about. I was just like, wow, I'm calm, and let's just get on with it.
You note too that before, when you're briefing your guys in the stairwell to take the roof, that you thought about those World War I soldiers getting out over the top in the trenches, not knowing what their fate was. To what extent does patriotism of being a Kiwi motivate you?
Oh, 100%, yeah. I mean, it's everything. Every time I see the New Zealand flag, I'm proud that I'm representing New Zealand. I mean, this type of work that we're doing overseas doesn't land with all Kiwis. And, that's the way it is. I respect everyone's position on this. But, definitely, when we're getting on the plane and we're leaving New Zealand, there's definitely that sense of patriotism. I don't think that, patriotism for our armed forces is generally that big in New Zealand. It's probably more, it's bigger for our sports teams. That's just the way it is. But yeah, we definitely, that definitely sits inside me, and drives me on is why I'm, I resign myself to the fact that we're either going to get, me personally, I can only speak for myself personally, is that, I'm either going to get seriously injured or killed here, and is it worth it? And for me, it's worth it from the perspective of being a New Zealander or representing New Zealand, and it's definitely worth it from the perspective of, helping or protecting people that can't protect themselves.
You talk about how the Kiwis operated a bit differently. You say that other forces saw the job as to simply destroy the enemy, even when it wasn't always clear who the enemy was, and didn't always stop to consider the impact of their actions on people who might not be combatants. I mean, did you feel uncomfortable about the actions of other forces over there?
I can't speak for other forces. For us, we do have a hearts and minds mindset, particularly in the regiment. I mean, that's our base. We go all the way back to Malaya. That's what we're doing in Malaya. And also, we're doing a lot of UN operations around the world as an NZDF, complete. Timor was another thing that we all transitioned through as well. So it's sort of embedded into us to have that, genuine connection with the local population. That's how we approach things. And, every time we sort of drove into a village, whether they're hostile or not, we'd make sure that we were having those conversations with the right people, just asking the questions that we're, there to answer. Just being genuinely connecting with people and trying to have that rather than rolling in behind armour, being all staunch, keeping people at arm's length, being hostile, it's never going to bode well.
You would have seen some of the reports and things. I mean, the SAS was, the Australian SAS were in trouble, weren't they, with this Brereton report? There were nearly 40 murders of civilians, 25 Australian Defence Force personnel involved in what they said were basically war crimes. Did that surprise you to see that sort of stuff come out? These were incidents that happened in 2012, 2013, and are really just being sort of reported on now.
Yeah, it does surprise me. I mean, although we have 3 SASs in the world, New Zealand, the Australians and the British, we're all separate entities. We're not connected in any other way except for the word SAS. So, yeah, that was surprising. But I guess we just got to let the legal process play out and the due diligence to go.
And we'll talk about how you used lawyers in the SAS, which was quite striking. But just before I get to that, did you read the book Hit and Run that Nikki Hager and John Stevenson wrote? Largely, the inquiry found that the principal allegations in that book were not accurate, that they weren't revenge operations. This is in the Turgaran Valley, but that there may have been mistakes made. Were you in that operation back in 2010? No. So not something that you followed at all?
Not really. It's I'm not too sure where I was at that point. I think I was out. I think I was out when that inquiry was conducted. So, yeah, no, I know what we do, and I have full confidence of the boys that they're doing the right thing on the ground. If there's anything that is outside of our culture or the law of armed conflict or our rules of engagement, we dial in it pretty quick.
So you feel, sitting here today, that there wasn't anything that you guys did that you would not have thought ethically or in the rules of war that you should be doing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've got full confidence with the boys.
I was staggered to read that when you were pursuing high-value targets that you took lawyers in with you. And you write one operation that these lawyers are there and the helicopters took off and these guys were just standing there in the middle of the night with their briefcases and their suits and their good shoes up the mountains. You seriously take lawyers up to do that stuff? It's just to make sure that when you're taking a high-value target, this is someone that often the US wanted taken out, right? Or that the local...
High-risk arrest is generally the wording
and
we
what
use.
do the lawyers do? I mean,
well, essentially we're trying to develop a system whereby, a very solid, robust system of, when the CRU go out and do their high-risk arrests, that everything is seen when they're represented in court. There's no comeback. They should be doing the right thing all of the time. And that's for us as well. And, if people are taken off the target, then they see how they're treated. So there's no ambiguity at all. We've got legal representation from the Afghan government, and we think that was the best, at the time when we thought that was the best course of action.
So in 2021, like 20 years after 9/11, the US bails really, and the Taliban is back now. How do you feel about that? You put your life on the line, with your mates in the regiment. How do you feel now that the Taliban are back in control?
It's unfortunate, but again, my sort of mindset is that, we gave the Afghan people 20 odd years of relative peace. And, if they did the work and understood history, they would have taken advantage of that 20 years, got themselves educated, left, maybe gone to another country if they could, can't speak for everyone, and then got a better life. I mean, for us to have any effect on a country like that, we only have to look back in time and know that it would take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's never going to happen. We don't have the economy for it. Public opinion is going to sway the government to make sure we're not in there for that long. So I'm hoping, and I'm sure there's a lot. We do have a lot of interpreters that have come back that work with NZDF, and I can only speak for that, but there'll be other Afghans as well that have gone to other countries and prospering now.
Yeah, because you worked with, I think, about 200 crisis response unit CRU members, and I think you're right, only maybe 70 got out when the capital fell, and the rest were either killed or fled. I mean, again, that must be pretty gutting. You worked closely with these guys.
Yeah, that hit me pretty hard, but I can't dwell in it. It's, that was I only found that out recently, to be honest. It was towards the end of this year, the start of this year. I found out that only 70 made it out. The rest had either, like you say, fled or been killed. But we know the game we play, and potentially this could be an outcome. And so I'm sure it wouldn't have come as any surprise when those guys got caught that things weren't going to work out well for them.
I want to spend the last 5 or 6 minutes on delving a bit deeper into the psyche of an SAS soldier. Is there a typical mindset? I mean, could you be a middle-class, well-adjusted guy on his way to becoming an accountant who becomes a SAS soldier? Or did the people you see have something in them that was a bit different, maybe even a bit broken, that they were searching for something? And what are your observations in that respect?
I guess it comes down to your personal drive. And so where does the fire come from? And it's different for everyone. For me, it was proving myself to myself, and foolishly at the time, as a young fella, myself to others. I wanted to prove myself to people that I knew who doubted me down the battalion. That seemed to drive me on at that particular point in time, and even further on in my career, probably 5 to 7 years after that, I was still doing that until I realised it's probably not the greatest mindset, but whatever works.
Your parents separated when you were about 8 or something?
Correct. Yeah.
You were with your mum mainly. You had a couple of older sisters, I think, but mainly you and your mum. I mean, did you see those kinds of patterns? I don't want to get into psychobabble here.
My mum is highly independent and very focused as well, so I'm guessing a lot of that came from her. But selection, you can't hide from selection. You know what I mean? You can't hide yourself away. It'll bring out the worst in you. So you have to manage all that.
It'll discover your demons.
It'll discover your demons, and it'll reveal exactly who you are. And that's the best part of it. But again, it's what drives you. Like, what is driving you to get through that? And the fantasy doesn't meet the reality. It's what we say. Is we're weeding out the dreamers on selection course. So you don't know who can do it unless you turn up. You're never going to know. If you think you've got it, you could get a whole lot of high-end adventure races, or I don't know, Olympic athletes and that kind of thing, get them to the start line. But when we take the food and sleep away, that's enough. For a lot of people, they may not pass the second day because they believe that's what they need, and they don't.
You talk about the sense of brotherhood in the regiment, and I'm wondering whether maybe that's even part of the thing that you're searching for.
100%, probably. Yeah, I think so.
You're incredibly close with Steve Askin. We've mentioned him here today, and he tragically died helping people again in the Port Hills fire when the monsoon wraps around the rotor blade. That must have been pretty tough for you.
Yep. Yeah, it was very hard. I refused to believe it when I first got told about it. The man could get himself out of any situation. He was highly capable.
He was shot in the head at one point, and you had to tell him, "Have you had enough yet?" Sort of thing, was it?
Yeah, and we had a laugh.
He laughed about it.
Yeah, right after. But I said, "Have you had enough yet?" And then he smiled at me because I was just looking at him, and I laughed.
And his ears hanging off.
Hospital. Yeah. And I said, "You're going to hospital?" And he said, "No, I'm good." And I said, "No, you're going to hospital." But that's the kind of, human humility is one of our tenets.
Sure.
And so that sort of
you laughed at the time with dark humour, but you cried.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so that.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so obviously when it sort of hit me, and I knew he was gone. Yeah, I was definitely crying at home, and then it happened again in front of my family, and then it happened again without me having any control, in front of the boys in the regiment. But that's because that's how much he meant to me. He's a great New Zealander, and if people saw what I saw in terms of his bravery, particularly that night in the Intercontinental, but also, not even a week later, the type of guy he is, he, if ever I was going to, pick a team, he'd be the first man, straight up. Family man of faith, very strong, knows what he wants to do, committed, he's one of those guys that, it sort of put a question mark. I was thinking, one of the things I was struggling with for many years was, why did they have to take him? Of all the people in the world, why would you take away Steve Askin? And then I thought about his children as well, like what they're going to miss. But fortunately, his brother is almost like a replica of Steve Askins, so that's the only saving grace.
Final question. You're out of the SAS now. You're doing this educational work with young men. Just more broadly, what has an SAS soldier got to teach young men and to teach all of us?
Oh, a lot. I think my experiences are completely different to most people's experiences. They're very high end. I mean, the stuff that I'm doing with the Learning in the Outdoors program at Dilworth, and everything else I've done in my life is almost perfectly aligned to what we're doing with the boys out there, and building, essentially, we do stuff around leading self, a lot around resilience, self-efficacy, self-confidence and bits and pieces. And I sort of inject in, little stories here and there to help the boys understand from my perspective,
You got a few of those.
A few, yeah.
Hey, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
No worries.
That was 30 minutes with Jamie Pennell. This is 30 with Guyon Espiner. We'll catch you next time.